For a minute, I want to talk about photographs. They're surely the greatest thing that happened in history. Every home has its own collection of old stuff. Dog-eared, black and whites, yellow, sepia. People captured in a moment. Real, living, thinking, working people. Frozen in time. I met one such photograph on a Friday during this golden summer of 2013 in that excellent Museum of Country Living down in Castlebar. Black and white, a man standing beside a half-finished straw mat, a thin, grey-haired man in his late 50s, and beside him, his only child, a very serious 9-year-old boy. An old-fashioned man in his own field, showing his own skill of an autumn day in 1963. 50 years and a bit more. I know all this because the little boy in the picture is myself. And the da, Pat Monks, was a dab hand at making anything from the produce of the land. From rush St. Bridget's crosses through straw mats, bee skeps, sugan chairs, willow baskets, to the grandest little bits of carpentry. Even 50 years ago, he was an old-fashioned, self-sufficient man. Anyway, less than 4 years after the 1963 photograph, Pat had to leave behind his tools and his trades, and his stone house and his whitewashed yard, his animals, his friends, my mother and myself, and down he had to go to his early grave, the quiet and kind and gentle fella that he was. And a lot of a lifetime has passed, and a lot of change has taken place in half a century. But since that day, when I saw the photograph, I took to thinking about the da, and the people he dealt with on a daily basis. You could never call a farmyard a lonely place. And as the seasons changed, you'd have to cope with all sorts of people who were handy, in one way or another, and made themselves indispensable. I can cast my mind back and remember a procession of characters, like pig stickers, horse breakers, bull cutters, horn doctors, dog trainers, rick builders, sack carriers, stick sellers, ploughmen, tractormen, spudmen, Jewmen, chimney sweeps, wall builders, well diggers, tailors, cobblers, tinsmiths, whitesmiths, blacksmiths, drovers, higglers, tanglers, dealers and jobbers, and that's just the half of them. Every one of them is worth a story. I'm remembering just one, a dealer. Small word to describe a man who is prepared to buy or sell any living thing at any hour of the clock, any day of the year, in snow or in sunshine. As big as a bull, as small as a hen. His father before him was an accomplished dealer. He'd moved from the Galtee Mountains to the outskirts of Balbriggan in County Dublin. And he built a hell of a business with the farmers and butchers of the North County Dublin. He bred a bundle of sons, but it was the second youngest son who was the chosen one, the Dalai Lama of sheep and cattle dealers. Mick, we may as well get on first terms. Mick was wrestling with arithmetic in the Tech in Balbriggan. He must have been 14 years of age at the time when Mick Sr. landed into the classroom. Here, says he, enough of this. There's a fair in Annascaul in the morning. I have to bring sheep over to Matt Rooney. So you may get the train now to Tralee and get a lift out to the fair. Buy every white-eyed heifer you see, but don't give any more than £7.10. Them other lads of mine wouldn't buy eggs in a hen house. And so started a career in the razor-edge business of sheep and cattle dealing. In the 1950s and 60s, practically every farmer in the area kept sheep and cattle for rotation and to eat surplus vegetables. And our man Mick kept them supplied. The name of the game was to attend the fairs in Cork and Kerry and Tipperary or Limerick, ship the livestock home on the train, then put suitable bunches together for different farmers and make the margin as big as possible. Sounds easy. It's anything but. Stock had to be paid for on the nail at the fairs, but Fingal farmers liked a bit of credit. Or maybe they wouldn't buy because of any number of factors. I'd buy that cow, but there's hens in the shed. No problem, Mick would say, I'll buy the hens off you. You're better with a drop of milk than an egg. Next step, find a punter for the hens. The business grew, things changed, CIE got awkward, enter the van, the scut truck, the cattle lorry. Now Mick could arrive any time. I hear you sold the black bullocks. I've 10 rare ones here in the lorry. The word no was a waste of wind. Let them stand into the yard, I won't charge you for looking at them. Once their hooves hit the ground, it was all over, bar the technicalities. During the farming expansion of the late 60s, Mick had orders for all sorts. One of the neighbours ordered a Hereford bull from him. Now, Hereford bulls were scarce. They were as scarce as millionaires at the time. But Mick located a young bull in a little farmer's place up above Waterville in County Kerry. The only problem was, the calf had been reared in the house, and one day, a contrary old collie bitch bit the 2 ears off him. Mick bought the bull and sold him to Tommy, the neighbour, in the dark, 2 nights later. When Tommy caught up with him, the answer was, "Are you going to talk to him or let him bull cows?" I can well remember that big roan bull for years and years doing his job for Tommy, not an ear in sight. Trade-ins now were a problem for Mick. Awkward enough to work out the prices. I remember a man calling in our gate to him once upon a time. He said, "Hey Mick, what's Horn Joe's worth?" He said, "Nothing, and they'll be worth less next week." Once early enough in his career, Mick found himself in the town of Rush in County Dublin on a sunny summer's evening. He'd come to a football match and his lift had disappeared. He got talking to a decent man in the area, Garvey Butterley from up the road. Turned out Garvey had a short-horn cow for sale, and Mick wasn't prepared to miss her. So he made his deal, paid up. Gee, she was terrible cheap. And he thought, how will I get her out of this town? If I leave her, Garvey will sell her again in the morning. But no transport. So he put his hand on the red cow's hip and walked her out the Whitestone Road past the graveyard and on to Bow Hill. She was a quiet old doll. There was no traffic. So she rambled on, taking an odd mouthful of grass. Up the hill past the big house gate, Peel's once upon a time and related to a Prime Minister of the United Kingdom. Across the railway bridge and into Lusk Parish, the Remount farm on their left. On the way into the village, Mick had to put up with plenty of slagging from the boys playing handball. But he could give as good as he got, and better. Up the street, he met his first potential customer, Bill Sweetman. "Mick, I'm buying nothing till after the summer." "Right, Bill, you're not the only pebble on the beach." Mick and his cow kept walking through the green, past the church, and west out that old Quickpenny road. I wonder where that name came from. I've searched and inquired, but no result. Now there was a problem for Mick, because it was getting late for calling to clients. Even though it was a fine June evening, Mick was wondering as he passed the Bilrother Union farm on his left. 100 years before, those fields would have been full of inmates of the workhouse, all quiet now and in ruins. Though neither Mick nor his cow realised it, this was the very road taken by Donald MacMurrough O'Mailachlan and his Meath men in 1135 on the way to burn and pillage the abbey in the town of Lusk. Donald didn't make the return trip. Some Lusk man left an arrow in him at the shadow of the Round Tower. But at Hedgestown School, Mick took French leave and let his cow into the playground. Plenty of grass, and he laid himself down on the bank. It was nearly midnight, and at 7 that morning he'd been selling heifers in Screen in County Meath, so a rest and a sleep were indicated. Lord Howth had donated a hunting lodge of his to house the first school here in Hedgestown, to educate the children of his tenants in the area. It had many a threat of closure, but it's going strong to this very day. Daylight comes early in June. So Mick and the cow were on their way before 4 o'clock, under the wires at the 5 roads and heading into the west, through the Nevet and the Cross of Nacalia. Nobody up yet, so they kept walking. Hollywood, a busy place for hundreds of years, has been slowly decaying since the dissolution of the monasteries. Now it's just another grey ruin, a quiet little graveyard tucked into the hill. The next crossroads, the Nag's Head, had a tavern for thirsty travellers up to about 1860. No chance of refreshments here for a cattle dealer and his cow. George Sherwin in Damastown was an early riser, could be a buyer. "Mick, I wouldn't take her for a present. Keep going." There's a grand little church at Damastown here, part of the Knoll and Ballybuckle parish. Parish priest Father Hatton fed a few cattle. But no, any cow bar a red cow, come back when you have a black one. Under the trees at Malahau, the home of the Baker family. Originally rectors of Hollywood, about the same year as Mick made his trip, a foal was born in that field on the right, to one of their mares, Bright Cherry. He was an accident-prone little bugger. He managed to geld himself on the barbed wire. But they dressed him up and brought him off to Gough Sales. They called him Arkle. On the bend here is a yard called Fanning's Walls. I don't know who Fanning was or why he built the walls. This stage, Mick had about 12 miles on the clock and no sail. But he turned right for Garristown at Spring Hill and stepped out. Across the field on the left is the Grolla, another ruined church, graveyard, a holy well. Somebody deepened a ditch in the 1970s and the holy well ran dry. Such is life. Baldwinstown is quiet enough now, but 250 years ago it was a flyer. It had mills for corn and cloth, timber merchant, shops, taverns, all gone. The two travellers made a right turn there and pulled up at Jim Keogh's 2-storied house. Jim didn't surface too early, so Mick lit a handful of gravel at the top window. "Have a smashing cow for you, Jim." "How much, Mick?" £12.10. "Turn her into the shed and I'll give you a brief in a minute." The word check was never said in polite circles. It was always a brief. Mick collared his brief, got a lift to Balbriggan with the bread man. He had to be at a fair in Kilmallock the next morning. There's a full book to be written on this man's exploits. He worked the trade until his health packed in 2010. Then Alzheimer's took hold. The last time I saw him alive, I'm not sure if he knew me, but he said, "Good man yourself, any chance of a brief?" He was the last of the cowboys.